drink champagne, some die of thirst. No way of knowing which way it's going. Hope for the best, expect the worst. Hope for the best.
Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, September 27th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. Just noting that there's very little time left. If you wish to come and attend our 14th annual Commentary Roast in New York on November 17th of this year, the roastee, yes, I know it's a scandal, it's a shanda, is Natan Sharansky, the greatest living Jewish hero, and we are going to spend an evening attempting and failing, I assume, to make fun of him in the manner to which he deserves to be made fun of, which is not to be made fun of at all. But that is our challenge. That is how we run our annual fundraiser. We're very proud of it. People love it. And if you are interested in attending, please go to commentary.org/roast and join 500 other commentary family members and our cast today, who include executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist and director of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And Matt's colleague at the American Enterprise Institute and the author of the new book, The Extinction of Experience Being Human in a Disembodied World, Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Last night here in New York, around Grand Central Terminal with the United Nations General Assembly in full swing. Full swing today. Benjamin Netanyahu will be speaking before the United Nations General Assembly this morning. Also this morning, apparently Donald Trump will be meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky at Trump Tower. Another sort of offshoot, not only of the week's controversies, but also the fact that Zelensky is in town for the United Nations General Assembly. There was a full-on, full-bore show of power by what can only be described as a pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah mob. Hundreds and hundreds of people yelling, screaming, chanting, with some counter demonstrators both in front of Grand Central Terminal and then moving up Park Avenue to the Regency Hotel where the Israeli delegation is staying. And I think, as many people said, the fact that it's kind of a long time, actually, but it's 23 years since 9/11. And imagine being a man from the future, traveling back in time to the week after September 11th with your iPhone, which of course did not exist at the time, and then showing people on the streets of New York the video of people chanting pro-terrorist, pro-Islamist terrorist slogans and yelling and screaming in the streets of New York. And they would have thought that you were...
It's worse than that. Insane. I'm sorry. There were Hamas flags being flown, and they were directly threatening Netanyahu, standing outside his hotel and saying, "We're going to get you," which yes, goes, I think, beyond just peaceful, or not, in this case, not peaceful protest.
The scenes are shocking only because they're not on a college campus, right? I mean, it's like, so, well, college campuses now, I mean, they're all like this. And there have been little bits and pieces of things like this. But, remember when the demonstrations broke out last fall on the streets of various cities, they were all under the cover of a support for a ceasefire, right? It was all ceasefire, anti-Israeli genocide, but also there was a cover. The cover was, there needs to be a ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. That's all gone. No one's talking ceasefire. This is just essentially the new slogan seems to be from Rafah to Beirut. It's all one fight. So that unites the Iranian-backed Katamite organizations from Hamas to Hezbollah in a single unified field theory of the pincer movement to take over and destroy Israel on the streets of New York City.
Well, it's interesting that basically Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, said the same thing as the protesters out on the streets in his address to the UN General Assembly yesterday. He said that this would continue until the occupier goes home, leaves. And when he's referring to the occupier, he's referring to Israel, period, not the IDF forces, which have security control over parts of the West Bank. So with supposed partners like this, it is incredible to me that this administration, U.S. administration, as well as the, I guess you could call her the front runner. She's ahead and slightly in the polling average for president of the United States, both insist on a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah, because the other party that would get the state that doesn't yet exist doesn't seem to want the state. That is the rhetoric that is now being used, as you say, by the supposed moderate faction.
Yeah.
The radicalization of this conversation has now moved to the acknowledgement.
I mean, the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution.
Right.
They've made that clear for 30 years.
Right. Now,
they want a one-state solution. Right.
We know that. But the general tenor, there's always been a layer of, we want to participate in a conversation that will involve the two-state solution.
Right.
The layer is gone. The mask is off. Though, of course, masks were the fashion choice, the fashion object of choice at the demonstrations, of course, just so people couldn't get people's photos on, YouTube and send their pictures to their employers and say, "Is this someone you want to keep hired?" But it's all, wars have a way of clarifying or exposing or revealing deep truths because, you're getting to the essentials. And so Israel now is better now revealed that Israel does not have an interlocutor for the future. There is at this moment, there is no one to engage with for a future that involves some kind of grand design, grand bargain, grand change, grand alteration in the map of the Middle East that will create a new kind of stability. Israel wants it more than the Palestinians do. Israel has always wanted it more than the Palestinians do. That's why Israel agreed to Oslo, and why the Israeli body politic, though it is now extraordinarily skeptical of the two-state solution. Large numbers of Israelis are hopeful in a kind of desperate way to find some way out of the bind that they're in, since they do not want to be people with some kind of administrative occupying authority over the West Bank. Nonetheless, here it is. And so there's a clarifying element to this. The question is, what does it clarify for us in the United States that again, less than a quarter century after 9/11, Americans are now openly supporting Islamic terrorist groups in the streets of our major cities, on the campuses of our major universities.
Well, a lack of leadership. The other thing to note about the protests last night, so we have basically an absentee president. Harris is, she yesterday did the whole photo op with Zelensky at the White House. Biden is clearly not doing well if you see him for every public appearance, the rare public appearances he makes. But New York doesn't have a mayor. There's a strange sort of power vacuum at the top, and our institution, I think it leads to the sense of unsteadiness. When a protest happens, who's in charge? Who comes out to the podium the next day and says, "We don't tolerate this kind of hate in our streets"? Well, it's usually the mayor. There's no mayor. He's under indictment. I feel like there is this and on college campuses, that's supposed to be college presidents, and they're obviously not doing that either. So there's a weird power vacuum for the people who post 9/11 stepped up constantly. The mayor of New York, the president of the United States, lots of leaders. We don't have those kinds of leaders anymore either. It's not just the protesters who are a problem here.
And it's also what leadership there is. They're the only ones for whom none of this is clarified. The protesters themselves, as you say, are not saying ceasefire, and they're not talking about two states. They're saying we want it all. We know that the terrorist leadership has dropped that pretense. Israel, of course, knows the score. It is only American leaders and diplomats who are pretending that there is still this ceasefire possibility ever looming. It's an alternate reality, and it's the one that they are clinging to.
I think that it's all disingenuous anyway, because it's a talking point, because obviously there is no deal to be had. So when you talk about a deal when there's no deal to be had, and you say, well, we need a deal, we need a ceasefire deal. So that was Kamala's line. And we need a deal that leads to a two-state solution. And what you're talking about is something that's not going to happen. It's like when people say, well, what we need is 100 million units of affordable housing. Well, that's not going to happen. Like, we need all kinds of things. We need flying cars, and we need cold fusion, and we need power we need power sources that have absolutely no radiating effect, and all of that. We need all kinds of things that we're not going to get. So when politicians in particular promulgate or preach or try to retail unrealistic policies that they have every reason to know are unrealistic, you can either decide that they're fools, or that they're being wildly cynical and that they're trying to put one over on the American people.
With Kamala Harris, it is hard to decide between those two.
That is exactly the problem. No, but I mean, that is exactly the problem that we are facing with her, particularly after her performance this week. We have this. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she stands for. She's going to make a speech about the economy that's going to make that clear, and she doesn't say anything new. And then she goes on with Stephanie Rule, and she doesn't say anything new. So
she's going to the border tonight, Friday night, which is when you bury bad news, typically. Yeah. She's going to Arizona, to an area near the border, and supposedly seeing what's up there. So
she's
that she can
going to the only area near the border where there is
it's calm, right?
Yeah, where it's calm.
Well, and where
one spot.
They've carefully curated the spot, because all the locals are like, no, we have relatives across the border. It's basically the Kumbaya spot on the border. She's going
like
there.
Sedona. It's exactly like the Sedona of the border.
But she's also doing exactly what she did with her speech in the economy, exactly what she did by sitting down with Stephanie Rule. And I think, Matt, you're the one who said this the other day. Like, she's checking off boxes so she can say, I did that. But the way she's doing it actually shows their campaign is doubling down on obfuscation, abstraction, all the things that the American people are becoming frustrated with.
I think, John, your point about these talking points and these kind of canned answers that have no relationship to reality is very important, because what these lines essentially are just excuses for the status quo and kind of rationales for power. Just we're going to build all these units. In her speech this evening at the border, she's going to say, I believe in a sovereign nation. We need to have rules, and we need to enforce them. No one should take her seriously. But she says it in the sense that, okay, I'll say it, and maybe that'll be enough, and then we'll just go on and do whatever we want. I mean, think about what her boldest policy move this week. I guess it wasn't anything about the economy or the border. It was her call to suspend the filibuster in order to pass a national Roe v. Wade, which would end any state restrictions on abortion across the country. That's what she's really interested in. But even that is just at the service of whatever the Democratic machine wants at a given time, because, as was pointed out to me earlier today, when she got into office as a United States Senator in 2017, she was among the Democrats who signed a letter calling for the preservation of the filibuster, because at that time, the Republicans were in control of the Senate. And I have no doubt that if Kamala Harris is elected president in some 40 days, but she goes into office with the Republican Senate, she will become the biggest defender of the filibuster you can find in the Washington Beltway.
So, we've shifted from this, discussion of policy in the Middle East to the vapidity of the question of whether the vapidity of the Harris campaign is deliberate or is the truest reflection of the candidate herself. And I desperately hope for the future of America that it is the former and not the latter. I would
where is the evidence that there's a secret, thoughtful, nuanced policy-making politician behind the vapidity? I've never seen it.
Hope is the thing with feathers, Christine. And what I'm saying is, I think it is an interesting Hobson's choice. Do you want a dumb, vapid president, or do you want a cynical, Machiavellian president whose interest in power is directed toward empowering things that you don't like? And that, so if you have your president is, Michael Scott, or is Jim from Yes, Prime Minister, is that better because the damage can be mitigated by her own narishkeit or foolishness? Or is it better for her to be a Machiavellian because maybe she can be made to see by circumstances that her own power choices are actually going to harm her in the long run and be bad for her politically, and therefore, like Bill Clinton, she can be made to see reason and shift gears and do things.
Okay, but but there's no evidence as vice president, which is the major record we have of her achievements or lack thereof, that she's capable of that. And unless you think she's so Machiavellian that she watched the president deteriorate in real time, watched other people actually run the executive branch while pretending he was still nominally leading it. Also, she could plan her own rise in power and then reject his policies and expect the American people to believe that she has, made a 180 turn and suddenly will solve the economy, solve the border, solve foreign policy crises. I don't see her being that politician. And I wouldn't call Trump Machiavellian either. I would call Trump narcissistic, which has its own dangers in terms of, access to power.
Well, okay, so something happened over the course of the 3 months before Biden's, or maybe the month, if you want to say it really all started just with the debate, but I don't think it all really started just with the calamitous debate. Something happened over those last 3 months that meant that the grand design of the coup plotters against Biden, Pelosi and Obama and whoever else it was hijacked a little bit by Harris. Like there is this whole line of argumentation or, speculation on the part of people who were reporting this out more closely that it was not Nancy Pelosi's intention that Kamala Harris be the person who was going to emerge if Biden had to quit, that everybody had the same reservations about Harris's fitness or ability to do this as we have been told for 2 years Biden has had about her. And that nonetheless, Biden stepped aside and she was there in 3.5 seconds and completely forestalled that mini primary idea, or that
remember the most powerful force in the Democratic Party is identity politics. And there were shots fired across the bow of Democratic leaders who thought that there could be some type of open process or mini primary leading to a strong nominee by Harris allies, saying, if you pass over Kamala Harris, if you pass over the first potential Black woman president, first potential Indian woman president, you will have a stain on your reputation. And that was very powerful argument within the Democratic Party. And the only person who resisted it for a few days was Barack Obama, because he really was the only person who can resist it. But within a few days, it became clear that even he couldn't find a way to avoid the reality of a Harris nomination. And so he endorsed her. But I think that played a huge role, as it played a role in her selection to begin with, right? I mean, Biden went out of his way. Went out of his way to say, I'm going to choose a woman for my vice president. And then during the summer of George Floyd, he revised that statement to say, I'm going to choose a Black woman for my vice president. And the list of potential vice presidential selections was extremely short when he had narrowed it down to that one identity category. And that gave us Kamala Harris.
There's also, in terms of her stepping right into the breach, the fact that, okay, so it's revealed that the president is incapable of running for re-election and, in my opinion, remaining in office. Now, on top of it, the party's going to say, oh, and the vice president, she can't run either. There's this tremendous admission of total failure about the White House if they were to go that route, right? Neither.
Well, that's a really good point. And the money. The money
right.
would easily transfer to her.
Right. No, but if you want to play the fantasy out, and we'll do this. We'll do this for 10 seconds. The grand design would be that Biden says he's not going to run and resigns the presidency on the grounds that he is infirm. She then becomes president and says, I am not running for president. We're in a crisis. I'm going to be the bridge between now and the next president of the United States, who will be a Democrat, and I will serve as president under the terms and auspices either of the 25th Amendment or that Biden will resign, and there will be a mini primary, and then, somebody will emerge. I will support that person, and I will be a hero for having, been Cincinnatus and all that. And clearly, I think that was on part of the possible potential agenda. And again, we're going to have to wait till 2027 to find out what happened, if we ever do, but we will at some point or other. And there will be 3 or 4 different things that were on, but I'm saying in her defense, in this question of whether or not she's vapid or she is a chess player behind the scenes, that's the one piece of evidence that we have, that she's a chess player behind the scenes, or she empowered chess players behind the scenes poker or whatever, to play her hand and to get her where she needed to be. Because it did happen.
Yeah, and look, you're absolutely right. And we can't neglect the fact that she has this 2-point lead over Trump in the national polls. And the swing state polls are all over the place, but they're close. And on Fox yesterday, we had swing state polls having Trump up in Arizona by 3 points, but behind in Georgia by 3 points. And
then we have Emerson that has him up in Georgia by 6. So
and then we have Marist polls showing basically tied race across the country.
Yeah.
But we have Bloomberg Morning Consult polls showing her with significant leads in all the swing states. It's driving me insane. All these polls, they all amount to the same thing. It's a very close race, and so her talent, I don't know what her political talent happens to be, because it is the case that she wrapped up this nomination very quickly. And then she had a remarkable run, right? I mean, the visit to Wilmington, the VP rollout with Walz, the convention, right? The different rallies trolling Trump. She had a great couple of weeks there.
Yeah.
The problem was, as soon as she actually had to put flesh on the bone of her potential presidency, and questions started rising, and then the 3 interviews that she's done, the Dana Bash interview with Walz, the Oprah I was going to say telethon, the Oprah infomercial, and now the Stephanie Ruhle interview.
4, right? Because there was also the National Association of Black Journalists.
Yes, and then 5, because there was that local interview with the ABC reporter.
Yeah.
Which was hilarious too.
Where the filibuster. That's where she.
No, that was a radio interview in Wisconsin. This is 2 weeks ago. She did a TV interview with the local anchor.
Oh yeah,
she talked about being middle class.
And the look on his face, because he was trying to be very generous. And I mean, all of these people conducting the television interviews are trying to help her, but it just does not work. And so that's leading to a situation where you just think that she's just not up to it. Like, how can?
But there are two things that should be checking her right now in a normal election. The first, the media, at least a little bit, even though they tend to be very, throw softballs at Democrats, and they're not doing that at all. They're just pretty openly, except for yesterday's story, the mild criticism from the New York Times about her MSNBC interview, they're completely on board with the Harris campaign. The other person, though, she's going around talking like a Reagan Democrat in some of her, or Reagan Republican, talking about, I love free and fair markets. No, she doesn't. But who's not checking that? The Trump campaign. Her opponent is completely blowing it in terms of holding her to account, reminding people of her record, reminding people of where she is placed on the spectrum of the Democratic Party, which is far to the left. He's not doing his job either. So she's unchecked.
Well, we're not seeing the Trump campaign do the job. But from what I'm hearing, if you're in one of the battleground states, you are seeing it.
In ads?
Now, again, that means in ads. Now, that means you have to, I guess, watch television or whatever, be in the right algorithm on YouTube to see the ads, but that they are very much Harris liberal, liberal Harris, Harris too radical, 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 Harris is a radical. Now, I think we began talking about the it wasn't a riot, but the demonstration last night at Grand Central and then moving up to the Regency Hotel. And some of this poses a danger for Harris in the next 6 weeks because people are not going to look at any of that and say, those people are Trump's people, right? They're not carrying tiki torches. They're not talking about Confederate statues. They're not talking about replacement theory. They're waving Islamist flags and chanting slogans about Islamist terrorist organizations. And the ultimate truth about a president and what people are choosing when they're choosing a president is, am I going to be safe under this person? Is the country going to be in order? Are things going to be in order? Will there be stability? Like, can we just go on with our lives? And if this goes on in the course of October, I don't know that Trump needs to say that. Remember, we're talking about a tiny sliver of people. 7-8% of the American people are going to decide this election, if they're genuinely undecided people. And we don't know what they see. They seem to be low information, doesn't even seem to begin to describe who they are or what they know. But if it's a vibe election, and the vibe is that people who are generally aligned with her are all crazy fans of Iran, that vibe gets to the essential root of what you're voting for president for. You're not voting on housing. You're not voting on the capital gains tax rate. Okay.
It's complicated, though, by the fact that I don't think that the people who are aligned with her are crazy fans of Iran, to be honest. I think the people who are crazy fans of Iran don't like her. But it doesn't work both ways. She's fine with them. She's hoping they'll like her enough, especially compared to Trump. It's that she's giving them a pass, and that's a harder thing to see.
This is where I got to disagree. The question is, if you look at demonstrators versus this is what I was thinking about last night, because this was a very big thing in the 60s, and people on the liberals never really understood this. Take Kent State as my example number one. So Kent State became this mythological event for the left, where the state opens fire on innocent war protesters, killing 4 of them, right? That's the Kent State story. Songs about Kent State, books about Kent State. You still know what Kent State is when I say Kent State. It's 55 years later. There are 2 stories of Kent State, and the second story of Kent State is why Richard Nixon won 61% of the vote in 1972, which is that there were 4 19-year-old National Guardsmen standing there while this mob of war protesters ran toward them. They were scared terrified kids on one side and kids on the other side. And they had guns and the other ones didn't have guns and they shot them. And that was a terrible thing. But when it came time to figuring out whose side were you on in the United States, the American people were on the side of the 4 terrified National Guardsmen and not on the side of the war protesters.
Look, this is exactly why the Democratic polling analyst David Shore and the Harvard economist Roland Fryer were canceled in the midst of the 2020 election. They had the temerity to point out that in times of public disorder or perceptions of public turbulence and chaos, Republicans benefit. And the same lesson that applied in 2020, where the mostly peaceful protests probably boosted Trump to get him as close as he came to winning a second term, that lesson applies in 2024. If there's chaos on campuses, Hamasniks running wild in the streets, if there's chaos overseas and weakness demonstrated by Harris or President Biden, this will help Trump. I think it goes to why we're spending so much time arguing over crime, whether crime has risen or fallen in the last year. It's definitely up since 2020. But my friend and former employee, Charles Lehman of the Manhattan Institute, had an excellent Substack yesterday pointing out that the issue isn't really crime. The issue is public disorder. People sense public disorder.
Right.
The rise in homelessness, the fact that you have to get a CVS attendant to open up the case to get shaving cream or razors when you visit the pharmacy. The fact that pharmacies are actually being closed throughout the country because of fear of shoplifting. These smash and grab burglaries that are taking place in Washington, D.C., I know Christine's aware of. That's what's actually contributing to a sense of anxiety in the public that benefits Trump, not the minutia of whether murder has fallen in the past year. And if it has fallen, it looks like it has. That's a good thing, but it's broader than just this one statistic.
No,
and there's that one,
fallen.
but there's one complicating factor though to that, which I think is why we see, which is why there's so many more undecided or uncertain voters who would normally move to the right on those issues, and that's Trump is himself a chaos agent. And I know the Democrats' efforts to constantly remind everybody of January 6th notwithstanding, people still do associate him with a kind of chaotic, not quite mob, but, people who are a little extreme. And
they have every right to do that.
Exactly.
I mean, think about his actions yesterday, releasing a text message that was sent to him by a kind of a ally of Volodymyr Zelensky, releasing the Zelensky text in public right before taking the lectern for a wide-ranging press conference. I mean, this will be our future if Trump wins. It will be exactly like the last time he was president.
Yeah.
But so that's why what matters, and this I think is a key point here. What matters is what happens. This is the 27th of September. The election is on the 5th of November. There's going to be the month of October, and let's stop talking about the polls. The polls have made it clear that anything can happen in November. She can win, he can win. Watching the polls day by day by day is turning out to be a fool's errand. It's all the same. Some of them show her up, some of them show her down, some show him up, some show you. You can go to that one of those maps to make your 270, and you can make 25 different maps.
270 to win. Every 4 years,
I mean, you can literally
go through the roof. I know.
Can literally make 10 different maps.
That's how I spend my days when I'm not on the podcast.
So the polling is not helping any longer. The polling has told us what the polling can tell us, which is it is a jump ball election. She is likely to win the popular vote. Period. She's likely to win the popular vote. That will make it 3 times in a row that Democrats have won the popular vote. You could actually say it's like 4 out of the last 7, right? Or no, like 6 out of the last 7 elections.
Yeah, the last 5 times they've won the popular vote.
Right. Okay. So and then 2000.
Right.
So that's 6 out of 7. They will have won the popular vote. Significant fact. Doesn't tell us who's going to win the electoral college. And so this small number of people in the middle who's going to decide, say Pennsylvania, which is the state that will decide the election, all things being equal. Not that all things are being equal, because North Carolina is a weird wild card, but could be decided by 20,000 votes again, or 30,000 votes. It's insane. It's crazy. It's 30,000 votes out of 300 million Americans, like 330 million Americans. So vibes are back. The vibe is what's going to decide this election. And the vibe is, that's where the disorder stuff comes in, because if the country looks like it's in a bit of a mini meltdown over Israel, oddly enough, a nation of 9 million people, that's going to help Trump, because it scenes like the one at Grand Central Terminal are not good for her in vibe terms.
Can we spend a few minutes talking about the mayor of the city where Grand Central Terminal is located?
We must do that, but before I do that, I want our listeners to know and remember that our friends at the Competitive Enterprise Institute are back with new episodes of their breakout Free the Economy podcast. If you're not already listening, Free the Economy features host Richard Morrison exploring opportunities for financial success and self-fulfillment in a world with less government control. Think of the podcast as big ideas meets real-world application to make our economy stronger and make Americans happier, healthier, and wealthier. Check out Free the Economy wherever you listen to podcasts, or visit cei.org/podcasts. Mayor Eric Adams.
Turkish delight.
So I read through this indictment, and once again, it's not as cut and dry as you think it is. And there's some weird stuff in there that says to me that they're going to need more from their witnesses and a superseding indictment to make this case stronger. I could talk about that in the middle, but were you guys like delving into it? Do you agree with me that at second blush it's a lot
of charges for getting free upgrades, which I think would not strike the average citizen as, horrifying corruption. But yeah, it is.
I don't delve. I skim. But what I took away from my skim is that he was basically trading favors with representatives of Turkey, and that should be frowned upon.
But no, okay. There's one. They're able to delineate one favor. Okay.
Right.
One favor, and it about a fire code question involving the opening of a Turkish consulate in New York City. And I'm not poo-pooing that as a serious matter. But they say he took $100,000 in bribes from Turkey over many years. But most of that was in the form of airline upgrades. And
did he have the miles? Did he have the miles?
Hold on.
Not on Turkish Airlines.
You can get upgraded without the miles.
Yeah, that's true.
An airline is not, there's no legal policy governing upgrades for airlines. You can get upgraded in theory if there's an open seat. An airline puts you into a nicer seat rather than your seat because there's an open seat.
But what about
the cost to the airline? The nominal cost of the seat might be $16,000 round trip. The nominal cost to the airline for upgrading you is zero. So is it a bribe? Well, I can understand how you could. I don't know whether in a courtroom, people can say, well, it's not fair. Could you get that? No, he got it. Therefore, he was being traded favors. That is not.
What do you make of the anecdote in the indictment where his girlfriend wanted to go to some tropical locale, but he was like, well, we need to see if Turkish Airlines flies there first.
Yeah,
Doesn't
right.
that suggest a certain
It
awareness that he would be
An
treated favorably?
expectation of
It all
yes.
suggests, it all suggests, and I have no doubt that he is the Darwin Awards level crook, right?
I mean,
I
you
just
pointed
add
that
that-
out. You pointed that out when he was running in
I
2021.
sent you all that
yes.
video of him looking for drugs in a child's room from way back when, and said if this
I know.
guy becomes
No,
mayor, he is going to
look,
have a problem.
When he was mayor, he was living in New Jersey. Everybody knew it. And then he staged this phony baloney thing where he went to his son's apartment and claimed it was his apartment and showed that he had a pair of sneakers there. Like, he is a ridiculous figure. And I have no doubt that he's corrupt. But I think, and it's embarrassing, and it's an embarrassment. And however, I have to say that there is an idea being retailed among very close and dear friends of mine that he is being targeted because he is pro-Israel, and I think they should stop retailing that argument. First of all, it's not good for Israel. Second of all, whatever you want to say about the Biden Justice Department, since this was a U.S. attorney's indictment and therefore comes out of the Biden Justice Department, they have not been shy in the last couple of years about indicting Democrats, to be fair. Right? I mean, all we hear about is the deep state. They're going after Trump, and it's terrible. And I'm not going to have an argument about that. But we got Menendez indicted. We've got Adams indicted. We've got 2 or 3 other Democratic politicians indicted across the country. Hunter Biden was indicted. I know I'm not going to get into how ridiculous a lot of that was. It's not the narrative that the Justice Department exists to go after Trump exclusively is being interfered with a little bit by real world reality.
Well, it's a dilemma for many populists, because when the deep state attempts to drain the swamp, what do you choose? Right? I mean,
yeah,
the deep state could have its own reasons for going after Eric Adams or going after Bob Menendez, but the truth is, there are some real problems that I think are surfaced in both indictments.
Yeah, I agree. But I will also say this, that Adams, in addition to standing up for Israel, has pushed back on the Democratic establishment about migrants coming to the city a whole lot.
Yeah, but he's not pushing back against the Democrats. He's saying, give me money to pay for the migrants.
He's a showboat.
He's saying
you're right about
overwhelmed.
it, John.
He didn't say we need to toughen policies at the border. Joe Biden is allowing people in and screwing with our sovereignty. He's like, I got all these migrants here. They're taking up hotel rooms. Now it costs $1,000 a night to get a hotel room. And there's a lot of, this is terrible. Do something and make my life easier. So the idea that he somehow has become a warrior in the battle against the Biden administration's policies on migrants is a little
okay, but that even saying that is dramatic and radical on the left.
Not at all. Excuse me, not at all, because he's the mayor of the city and they're spending the money he would like to spend on Turkish airline upgrades. I mean, it's costing him money that he would like to be,
but he said the quiet,
spreading around.
I'm with Abe. He said the quiet part out loud every time there's been a front page. Well, they don't like that.
I don't think they're targeting.
Yeah, they're not targeting
this. I'm just saying.
I don't think they're mad at him at all. Honestly,
it was briefly refreshing to hear a democratically elected official actually state the obvious. But so I guess
I understand.
I do think there's a risk in this Justice Department, in particular, of prosecutorial overreach when it gets to public officials.
But
I mean, the Menendez case, that is something of a different category. Of course,
we're talking gold bars.
Gold bars. He's
in
been
his
forced
apartment.
from running for re-election. But in the case of Trump, in the case of Adams, you do take a real gamble as a prosecutor when you go after a high-level public official. You better have the goods. And we saw with the case against Bob McDonnell, the governor of Virginia, that when these cases work their way up to the Supreme Court, has a very strict rule that it applies in public corruption. And Bob McDonnell's charges were all dropped when we reached the Supreme Court. Now, as our friend Andy McCarthy points out, in lawfare, the process is the penalty.
Right.
So, it could be what you say, John, that this is kind of an iffy case that they have against him on the upgrades, and eventually down the road, it's going to be dismissed. However, he's in real trouble now, and he wanted to run for re-election next year, and that looks very unlikely.
No, he will run for re-election. I'm going to give you the scenario of the next year and a half of Eric Adams' life.
Please.
Eric Adams will not resign from office.
No.
And Eric Adams will run for re-election. Why? Because he will want to trigger the Justice Department rules that say that you cannot prosecute someone 6 months before an election. The primary is in September in New York for psychotic reasons. So that's September 2025. It is now the end of September 2024. So what is 6 months before that? March or something like that. They won't be able to get the trial up by March. They're going to be looking to get others who are involved in the case to flip and offer new information so they can file superseding indictments with more charges or better charges or whatever. So he will push this through March. The case will then have to be continued till after the primary in September of 2025. He will lose that primary, but he will not be tried and convicted before January 2026. And he will therefore remain mayor of New York from now until the end of his term, unless Governor Kathy Hochul triggers a little-known codicil to the Faber College Constitution that allows her to put him on double secret probation, and somehow in ways I don't really understand.
Well, Governor Hochul
is
so well known for her bold strokes and dynamic personality.
Exactly.
I'm sure she'll do exactly what you suggest.
Yeah. Right. So there was a case in, 1542 when a governor of New York removed the mayor of New York. It will probably be found to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Again, something that he would try to make a case for. So I don't think he is going anywhere. I think he will be mayor until 2020, and that he will not win the primary. Right. But any hopes that people have that he's going to go, and he's got nowhere to go. He's got nothing to do. He likes being mayor. He's not going to quit. He doesn't get anything out of quitting. Andrew Cuomo, look at Andrew Cuomo. He quit under intolerable pressure. He may, having beat a strategic retreat, end up as mayor of New York, having been the governor of New York, keeping his powder dry, waiting to see what happens as the controversy dims. Adams got nowhere to go. You've got nowhere to go once you've been mayor of New York. There is no electoral path forward, as we now know from the madness of Rudy Giuliani and others. So that's my scenario for the future of Eric Adams. And by the way, we should, those of us who live in New York, devoutly wish this to be the case, because the person who would become mayor is insane.
Yes.
This is a person who, if you had a meeting of the Democratic Socialists of America, which he is a member, Jumaane Williams, the public advocate of the city of New York, people in the crowd would be going, well, that's a little much. He's going a little far there. I mean, he makes AOC look like Amy Klobuchar. I mean, this is not a good thing. He would only be mayor for either 60 or 90 days until there is a general election that has to be staged. But of course, having become mayor, and he will then run for office in our crazy ranked choice voting system here in New York City, he could well win. And then I would have to leave New York City. So maybe if you want me out of New York City, yes, please. Abe would also have to leave New York City, because every rational person could not live in New York City with Jumaane Williams as mayor. Anyway, go ahead.
Rational person wouldn't be living here now, but yeah.
Okay.
There's another aspect to this. I brought this up to John yesterday at the office. We talk a lot about foreign influence in our politics, and how it's kind of thoroughly breached institutions at every level. In New York in particular, too. I mean, you've got these Chinese spy stations in the city. We talk about all the foreign money going into campuses, and the Iranian money and backing into the
Protesters.
pro-terrorist movements. And now you've got, credibly, the mayor of New York playing footsie and getting something for it from Turkey. This is a larger problem. Like, our guard is so down against these influence machines at every level.
It's worse than that.
Thank you.
Because Adams was recruited essentially as some kind of Turkish agent when he was the borough president of Brooklyn. This is before he was mayor. So if you're Turkey and you're like reaching down into the second level of American domestic politics in a city, in an outer borough, what else are you doing elsewhere? And what else are other countries doing elsewhere? And what game are they playing? Like, we are the only game in town. We are the world's hegemon, right? Are you like placing your bets on things? Maybe it's wise to start cultivating some state senator in Enid, Oklahoma. Who knows? State senator from Enid, Oklahoma could become governor. You know,
could become the vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. And you're there 25 years earlier. It's the same story as graft of all time, which is get in early, own somebody early, and then if they rise and rise and rise, you got them on the hook because the exposure of your relation, if you're a crook or you're something like that, will end their career. So they need to, you have a mutually beneficial relationship. Yeah, maybe. So Turkey, we now have evidence Turkey was doing this again at a kind of bizarre level. I mean, does this mean that like the borough president of the Bronx is getting paid by Finland? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
Armenia,
fair enough. Okay. Anyway, you're right. I mean, we're sort of, and you could just see we're a nation of opportunity. We have 339 3,300 counties. We have 50 states. We have 535 congressional districts and senatorial seats. We have thousands like all we've ever focused on is whether spies are reaching into the deep state, right? I mean, that's been the focus of a lot of spy novels and stuff like that. But what if they're buying off state senators in Kansas?
Yeah, both.
I don't know what they're
Whatever
getting
means,
for it. Yeah. But I mean, it's a low investment cost, particularly if it's only upgrades. Because again, what does an upgrade cost Turkish Airlines? Nothing. It's an empty seat, zero. That's all I'm saying. So we can our prosecutors can try to monetize that and say, well, he got $100,000 in upgrades, but the actual value in upgrade is zero. So I think they're going to need better charges to go forward with this case, which I think they may get because they do have 4 or 5 other people under indictment who probably haven't yet flipped on Adams. And there's no reason not to flip on Adams now. What is he, like a spiritual leader whom you really need to protect against the forces of evil? I mean, come on. He's a clown. And everybody who works for him knows he's a clown. And he knows he's a clown. He says he's a clown. It's like, I have swagger. That's what he's a ridiculous figure. But a man who is not a ridiculous figure is our own Matt Continetti, who has a commentary recommends.
Well, thank you, John. Today I'd like to recommend a piece of music by a young up-and-coming composer named Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. This was a new piece that was discovered just recently, a composition entitled Serenade in C, that it seems Mozart had written while he was still kind of in his early teens. It's 12 minutes long. It was recently premiered in Leipzig, and you can watch the performance on YouTube, and our Commentary Recommends Twitter feed, I think, can embed the video. It's absolutely delightful. As National Review said this morning, the kid shows a lot of promise, this guy Mozart. And as another friend pointed out to me, we have the blessing of a new Mozart composition before we have seen the next installment in the Game of Thrones series by George R.R. Martin. So who knows?
George R.R. Martin. Poor George
Who knows?
R.R. Martin.
We could get new Bach, new Beethoven by the time that George R.R. Martin either completes the next Game of Thrones book or expires and his literary estate has someone put it together and release it on their own volition.
This just reminds me of like maybe one of my 2 or 3 favorite one-liners in all of history, which is Tom Lehrer saying, it's very humbling if you think about certain things, like when Mozart was my age, he had been dead for 2 years. Which I still think is
great.
about,
I mean, it's a great piece, and you hear it immediately, and it's him. And there's these young musicians who played it in Leipzig, and anyway, it's definitely worth checking out and listening to.
So great. It's so highbrow. So excited.
Good to end on a highbrow note after
very
week,
highbrow.
Right?
Yes, after this week, and God knows what we will be facing with the news out of the UNGA speeches and the meetings with Zelensky and the border, and every day is just another body blow to our sanity, and we got 5.5 weeks left of this to go. So just remember, maybe after the election, we will be unburdened by what has been. So have a wonderful weekend. Watching to see if Aaron Judge makes it to 60. Got 3 games, hit 58 last night, so he can get to 60. Meanwhile, Shohei Ohtani has 53 homers and 58 stolen bases, and seems not to be actually a human being. He seems to be a creature from another planet who has landed here to show us how to play baseball.
It's like Harris being an AI candidate. Ohtani is an AI baseball superstar.
Yeah, so they say you can't pitch. He's like, okay, I'll steal 50 bases then. If I can't pitch this year, I'll steal 50 bases. Anyway, it's pretty amazing. We'll be back on Monday. So for Christine, Matt, Abe, John Podhoretz, keep the candle burning.